So tonight, I am pleased to bring to the stage Board of Directors and Vice Chair of the Conference Committee, Jessica Nettles, who is going to lead conversation with Sir Robert Gwaltney, who I've just knighted, apparently. So congratulations, Robert. So Jessica, come on up and I will cede the floor to you.
All right. Let me get, there it is.
Here she
I
is.
had to open the magical door or something anyway.
Yes.
So hey everybody. I'm so excited about tonight because I get to talk to one of my new favorite friends, Robert Gwaltney, who is the author of the Cicada Tree, which released to really high acclaim a few months ago and is just, it's so good. By day, Robert is the vice president of Easter Seals, North Georgia, and is a strong advocate for early childhood literacy, which is also a soft spot for me. So hooray. And honestly, if you haven't read the Cicada Tree yet, you need to buy it like now and read it this weekend. So come on up, Robert. Then we can get started talking. This is gonna be so exciting.
Hey,
Hey,
Jessica.
Robert. Yay.
Thank
All
you
right.
for having me.
Oh, of course. It's a huge pleasure. So we're gonna get started here, and I'm gonna try not to babble too much so you can talk. So you know, both of us are kind of debut novelists. Mine came out in the fall, yours came out a few months ago. And you know, we're both watchers of people. This is something that I've learned talking to you and you know, just watching in general. I think most writers are. And one of the things I've watched is how hard this guy has promoted this book. He has worked constantly promoting this book, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about how to promote or things that you can do to promote your book, even if it's just coming out of the gate and you're just getting started. And I really admire that energy that you have. And I'm fascinated because you seem to be striking a balance between the promotion and the creativity. So probably my first question is, did you know how you wanted to market the book before you really released the book? Did you have a plan already?
Well, so the whole marketing aspect of the promotions aspect is so new to me. I mean, everything, you know, this debut journey has been a learning curve for me. But I would say, I mean, after I signed on to publish the novel, I started, and maybe about a year out, I started thinking about, well, gosh, you know, how in the heck, you know, does a debut novelist and with a smaller press get noticed? I mean, as every Tuesday, many books are released out into the world, and there's so much noise, and there's so many wonderful works of fiction out there. How do you compete? How do you get just a little bit of attention? So I think that for me, I did a few things. First of all, I started doing a little bit of research, a little bit of reading. There's this group, this online group that I was a member of for about a year. It's called Dana Kaye's Breakout Book, and it's through through Mighty Networks. And it really is just, she's a PR person. And a lot of self-paced learning, and then there's some live Zoom conferences and interactions and things. So I've just started to get my feet wet with the language and the lingo. You know, it wasn't until, you know, just maybe a couple of months ago that I even knew what an Instagram book tour is. You know, it's I had no idea what that even meant. So I knew, I wasn't sure how I was going to proceed. So probably about a year and a half when I knew that the novel would be coming out of the world, you know, I just started, you know, saving a little bit of money and put that aside, and then I just started vetting some publicists. So I did work with someone, let's see, since January of this year, prior to the novel coming out, and which has been extremely helpful. So I think that she's been bringing a lot to the table, and then I've been working equally as hard to bring resources to the table as well. So I really, you know, until about a year and a half ago, I really didn't even begin to think about what this aspect of releasing a book would entail.
Right. And that's kind of understandable. I think I know you and I are almost the same age, so we can, you can probably remember, the way that publishing used to happen, where the publisher did all of that for you. You
Right.
didn't have to think about that. And we live in a different time now. I mean, you're with a small publisher, I'm with a small to medium publisher. And the first thing my publisher said to me was, you've got to start planning on how you're going to promote this. And I'm like, I was like you, I'm like, I was a deer in the headlight and didn't know what to do. And luckily he was kind. So it's good that you managed to figure out, oh, I need a publicist. That's something I didn't do. So now I'm like thinking, maybe I need a publicist. Okay, so you talked about, the publicist and all of that. Does networking at all play a part in this promotional thing at all?
Well, I think, well, first of all, for me, I mean, you and I both know that writing, is isn't an experience in isolation. We spend
Right.
so much time alone, and I think that to have a well-balanced writer's life, I think you have to have a sense of community. And
Right.
so organizations like Broadleaf are
Mhm.
critical to that. Having other writer friends, I think supporting the community is essential. So yeah, I think to some degree, networking is important, and having authentic relationships with others, I think, is extremely helpful. I mean, by nature, I mean, I'm an introvert, so but I do enjoy people, and I enjoy feeling part of a group and having a seat at the table. But
Right.
I'm not an individual. I don't consider myself gregarious by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah. I think I only know a handful of really, really gregarious writers. And the thing I've learned is kind of latch onto them and kind of like follow them, because they will teach you things, and you'll also feed off their energy a little bit and kind of begin to connect things too. And I think that's kind of good.
Absolutely. So I think the foundation is community.
Right.
Giving to that community as much as you possibly can, making friendships with other writers. I think, first of all, from a creative perspective, surrounding yourself with individuals who are bright and more gifted than yourself just helps elevate you. It helps push you along and it makes you want to be a better writer. It's like when you read a novel that you're just enraptured by, you get excited about getting, back to your writing desk to be able to try to create art in your own voice. So I think that that sense of community serves many purposes. It helps elevate you as a writer, and it's just a community of support. I love reading. I love knowing talented writers. So, I'm so proud when I can say, I know Jessica Nettles, I know Zachary Steele, I know Benji Carr, I know Kimberly Brock. It's wonderful to have that sense of community. So again, I think that serves as a key cornerstone in being able to begin to build your brand and your platform, your marketing platform. I think that I think most people don't realize is that whether you know it or not, you have a brand. and it's who you are as a writer currently, and it's how you present yourself to the world, and it's how you present yourself through social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok if you're adventurous. I think what I find most curious is that today, not only do you have to be a writer and tell stories that people want to read, there's also this expectation that people know you and that you're a bit of a performer as well. I mean, you've got this whole TikTok community that's building, and I've been sort of watching it from darkened corners, just trying to see exactly what this looks like. Is it something even age appropriate for me? Is that something that I might need to do? But I took myself through someone said that lamp is helping your brand.
I do love the lamp. It is gorgeous.
Well, so it's funny because I think that you have to, when you're taking a look at your brand And if you want to sort of manipulate your brand a bit, I think that you have to be authentic. So, what are your personal interests? For me, I went through this exercise where, I identified who I thought my readers might be. And then just getting a sense of what's my brand voice, and that's like how you want other people to see you and what you want other people to think when they hear your name. So
Right.
my tagline is spellbinding fiction with a Southern drawl.
Oh, nice.
And I think that says a lot about, who I believe who Robert Gwaltney, the writer, is presently.
Right.
Based on the Cicada Tree, and of course based on things that I've written before via short stories or novels that I put to the side that I just didn't think warranted moving forward. So I think it's important for everyone to sort of go through that exercise, and I'll sort of go through just quickly some of these notes that I jotted down. We certainly don't have to stay scripted, but again, who are your readers? Who do you think is going to be reading your work? And does your brand voice align with those readers? Are they going to connect with you? How you want others to see you, or what you want people to think when they hear your name, and also figuring out what your unique selling point is as a writer. Why will and do people read your work? And what are your unique strengths as a writer? And I think for me, and everyone that might be watching, maybe, ask themselves these same questions if they've not already reasoned through this and have a sense of, who you are, what your platform is, and what your brand might be. I think that for me, it's going to be Southern fiction. There are going to be elements of the supernatural, elements of magical realism, but I think they can expect language. And I think that they can expect that, though I say it's Southern fiction with elements of the Southern Gothic, I do think I sort of cross genre a bit. And so where some people might say it's literary fiction, I think that my work is both character and plot driven.
I would agree.
Yeah,
I would agree with that, definitely.
I'm hoping that people will see that the characters are developed, but also things are happening. So that would be part of, of what I would hope that people could expect moving forward when they're anticipating or making a decision if they'll read what I've written next. And then of course, I think we were just talking about this lamp. We were talking about authenticity. I mean, for me, really, there is a Southern vibe. I think that I show my personal interests to the world. I do love design. I do have an interest in fashion and in the arts and in literature. So I think that and I take time with aesthetic as well. So I think that people will see that, in my brand. They'll see that in my social media, but we're all unique, right? And they're not going to see me be necessarily politically vocal about an issue. There'll be other writers who can do that because that's who they are, and their readers will be drawn to that. So it's just, I think, figuring out these things, like right now, if you were to take a step back and you were to consider those things that we just talked about, what do you think your brand is today? And it's so important. And what's really fascinating to me is that, and I didn't really think about it, and other people told me this, but whatever your first novel is that's going to go out into the world, you're going to want to make certain that you're going to continue to write in that genre, because people are going to expect you to write similarly. Now, that doesn't mean you can't break away from it, right? I mean, there are people who have been successful at writing under pseudonyms,
Right.
but I'm not going to be able to come back and write, a crime fiction or write what you write, Jessica. That's just not what people think of me now. When they think of Robert Gwaltney, the writer. There's a handful of people that have discovered me. Again, I'm a debut writer. People don't know who in the heck I am, and that's what that's what we're working towards, right? To sort of break through.
Right. And I can understand that. I was thinking as you were talking about it, and You're right. The debut novel kind of is your signature. And I think some people would be kind of surprised at some, well, surprised, but not surprised, because I write Southern spooky stuff too on the side.
Yeah.
And then I write also adventure stories like Gilman stories and crap like that. So yeah, I mean, but having that brand really does make a difference, I think. And it's really cool that you have that focus, because I'm still kind of trying to get that focus. So very cool. So it's not really a formula though. It's kind of like
Yeah,
not truly a formula.
no, because I mean, I've not really followed a formula at all, and I really don't. There are some things that I felt that I needed to do just to reassess. Like, for instance, I didn't have a website until over a year ago.
Oh,
And
okay.
my friend Jeff Blocker, who's in my writing group, does some web design. And so when we were, and I had in my mind this vision of this like super sleek website. And he said, he goes, when you're deciding what images you're going to put on your website, you really need to think about who you are. He said, and he made the best suggestion. He said, take your own pictures. And let's start there. What are things that are, if you were to pull together objects that you think might represent you or might give the tone of who you are as a writer, or what your brand or what you believe your brand to be, take those images, and be as authentic as you possibly can. And I did. I mean, my website has the basic bits of information. It's a starting place. I hope that it will evolve over time, but I do think that when someone goes there, they'll get a sense slightly of what my brand is through those images and how I've laid things out and chosen to portray myself as a person and as a writer.
Right. And it really is a lovely website. I went and looked this morning because I was curious, because I really hadn't visited your website. Because I know you more on Facebook.
Right.
That's where
you don't have to go look.
No, you don't. But I like looking at other writers' websites, and I went through a whole period of doing that myself. When my best friend Amanda and I were building my website, my best friend built my website, and looked at different authors' websites and decided, okay, so what is you? Just like you, what is you? What reflects you? And also, what do you want out of this? Because some people do websites really well and some people don't, just like some people do social media well and other people don't. So I know you're active on, at least you're active on Facebook, Insta, and on Twitter, right? Are you on Twitter?
So I do very little on Twitter.
Okay.
But it's funny because I didn't jump on the Facebook bandwagon when everyone initially did. I mean, I really, just a few years into the Facebook, and I've been developing Instagram. And for me, it's funny, I don't have an author Facebook page, and I decided not to do that for now because it's manageable. And for me, what I've really enjoyed since the book's come out is readers having direct access, being able to message me, being able to interact with me on the Facebook page. And I hope, that if I'm fortunate enough to be able to build a humble readership of individuals that, have a curiosity about me and are interested in things that I'm interested in and want to read what I write, that, that they'll feel not only that they're readers, but that they're friends also.
Right, exactly. And I think that's really kind of I've noticed this with a lot of small publisher authors like you and me. We do tend to be more active in places like that. I like having contact with the audience as well, or with readers as well, because they kind of surprise you. And it's also good because you can share a little bit about yourself too, and it's interesting because I've watched you, and I won't say it's calculated, but you can kind of see that you're setting an aesthetic.
Yeah.
And I admire that a lot because my aesthetic has evolved over time. I've been on Facebook a long time, and it evolves. It evolves, I think.
Well, what's fascinating about, an aesthetic is not unlike what we do in world building in our novels, right? I mean, we write our story. I think that it has to be authentic and it has to be truthful. But yeah, I mean, I do, you know, when I present things to the world, you know, I want it to have a certain level, you know, of polish, you know, like I would my writing. But you're right. I think that that I do take great care in how I will present images to the world. You know, if I'm reading a book and I'm wanting to support a writer, I'm going to go to a little bit of trouble to make sure that their novel is that the cover is represented in a beautiful light. And people can usually expect on a Friday night I'm going to be by the fireplace, even in the heat of summer, with a book and a cocktail.
Which I always look forward to. I always look forward to that. It's like, okay, what's Robert reading this time? I'm curious. And that's good because it means people are coming back and visiting. And that's what you want. You know, you want them to come back and respond. And I think you keep talking about authenticity. And I think that's so important. And it's so beautiful that you really tap into that, because people can tell when you're not authentic.
Yeah. I think that when you're deciding who you want to be in the world, from a brand perspective, you know, it's something that if it's not authentic, it's going to be very difficult for you to sustain over time. Most definitely.
Yeah.
But you know, I had no idea the impact that social media, you know, would have on the promotion of books. Again, I think that if I were giving anyone advice that was thinking of coming out, who's going to be getting a novel out to the world, I would certainly contemplate an Instagram book tour, Bookstagram tours. Early on, I had a few readers who read early versions of the novel and enjoyed it. And they've been my biggest champions. Facebook, as you know, is just full of all of these Facebook book clubs.
Yes.
And with some of them have very large readerships and memberships. And you know, I had some readers early on who've been so kind to post about the book across all of these Facebook book clubs that they're members of. So word of mouth is so important. It's so key. And I didn't realize it until I actually saw things in work from a personal perspective.
Right.
So the word of mouth, all of us, you know, talking about what we're reading and supporting one another is so key.
So explain a little bit more about the Instagram book tour, because this is something that's kind of new to me. And now I'm kind of curious about it and thinking maybe I ought to try that, but I don't know how to start. So explain that a little bit more.
Sure. Again, so that's something that the publicist arranged for me.
Okay.
Her name is Anne Marie. And really from an author perspective, there's not a whole lot you have to do. Okay. So they will, I had to provide my publicist. She requested a number of books. I gave her those books, and then she sent them out with a pitch letter to Instagram. Well, actually, so first of all, she vetted. So there's several book tours that you can go on. Right. CICADA TREE went out on Susie approved book tours. Susie Leopold is the individual that manages that. So if anyone's interested in going on a book tour, certainly reach out to Susie Leopold from Susie Approved Book Tours. She was awesome. And so my publicist provided her with they collaborated. And so Susie, based on who she has it, influencers who like to read Southern fiction, we sent the pitch letters to. They got copies of the books. They either got a copy of the book or they got a NetGalley. And so the book went on tour. So there was a whole calendar. Like, so I don't know, we'll say Jessica Nettles Loves Books will be on January 15th. Benji Carr's Library will be on January 21st. So I knew each day that they were going to be posting. I didn't know what they were going to say. You know, fingers crossed that they're going to love your book and that they're going to say kind things about it. But the great thing about that is that, you know, that they have a lot of followers. Individuals who might not have had the opportunity to have even heard about the CICADA TREE had an opportunity to at least see the book cover.
Right.
and at least consider it as an option to read. So they will read it. They'll do a review, and they'll also, what I found is that while on book tour, like the Jessica Nettles Loves Books, she would go out and she would also post a review on Amazon, and she would also post a review on Goodreads, which was amazing. So then, you know, they're if they like your book, it's going to be a win-win, certainly.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, am I remembering this correctly? You did an interview with NPR recently. Tell me about that. How did that happen?
So there are a lot of things that happen that aren't necessarily calculated. They just happen organically. So
The best thing.
So the NPR in Chattanooga, I had an opportunity a couple of years ago to meet Richard Wenham, who is the who does the Richard Wenham show, and at that time he was doing something called Writers in the Round, and I got introduced to him through the work that I do on the online literary publication, the Blue Mountain Review, and so he invited me to be on that show a couple of years ago, and he said, and at that point I'd just gotten an agent, I didn't have a book deal yet. He said, well, should your work go out into the world, I would love to have you back and I'd love to interview you. So I just followed up, when the book was coming out, and just reached out to Richard, and he invited me on the show. So that's sort of how that came to be.
Right.
So the work that you do in the writing community, those individuals that you meet, it can be beneficial at times.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, let's see, what else can I ask about here? Because I'm thinking, so basically, I feel like what's being said is that it's a lot of legwork, but it's also a lot of, and it's also getting to know people, and it's also a little bit of luck, which is all true. And,
Yeah.
so are you doing a lot of things like connecting with individual bookstores, and how does that work? Does the publicist do that, or do you do that?
So the publicist in this particular situation, and they all handle things a little differently. They were instrumental in me, in introducing me to Foxtail Bookshop.
Oh, yeah.
And so I did a launch event that you came to, and I did it off site. And so Gary Parks from Foxtail Bookshop came, and they were the on-site seller for that event. So I was able to make that relationship, and they enjoyed working with me at that launch event. They actually invited me back, last weekend, and you had an opportunity. You were there. You came and participated in that event. So any other bookstore relationships would be things that I would have to build. With smaller publishers, and I know with mine, their model is not unlike the Amazon publishing imprints like Lake Union. I mean, they really do that. They don't mind if you're in bookstores, but they really do gear toward online sales. And of course, we all want to be in bookstores. So I'm in a handful. I've been able to make some connections to be able to make that happen. So we were talking earlier about organizations like Broadleaf. So
Right.
I also, about 2 years ago, I joined. So there's this huge book club that's called, this is very long, the International Pulpwood Queen and Timber Guy Book Club. And so it's for readers and writers. And I joined that as an author, and I had an opportunity to be part of that community. I submitted my manuscript to Kathy L. Murphy for consideration for book club, and it was accepted. So the CICADA Tree was the March 2022 book club pick for the Pulpwood Queen Book Club. And it's just, being in, so I've met a lot of authors through being connected with that organization, and they've all been extremely supportive. Everyone really utilizes their own social media platforms to support one another, and to be able to leverage those followers, which is pretty amazing.
That is really cool. So Also, I've heard you talk about your writers group, the folks that you actually had help you kind of put things together, because writers groups do that. So tell me a little bit about them, because they sound like really awesome people, and another connection to community.
Yeah, so I've been writing seriously for about 17 to 18 years, I guess. And when when I decided that, okay, if I'm going to do this, I've got to get serious about it. I've got to just actually engage in the act of writing. So I took a class with David Fulmer at the Margaret Mitchell House. And it was through taking that class that I felt like, from the feedback that he gave me, I felt confident. Yeah, I had more confidence to be able to move forward with the actual act of writing. He made me believe that there was potential there. And it was through him that I was able to meet an individual named Jeff Blocker, who was wanting to put a writing group together. And so the core members, it's small, we keep it small. It's Jeff Blocker, it's Mickey Dubrow, he's Jessica Handler's husband, and his novel American Judas came out a couple of years ago, and he has a new novel that's going to be coming out in 2023. And then we have a poet in our group, Marissa McNamara. So there are 4 of us. And so, we just support, we submit every 2 weeks, and a chapter or whatever pages we've completed, we get feedback. And I think that what's critical about choosing a critique group is that you want to make certain that that they're good writers, that the quality of their writing is exemplary, but also that they have your best interest at heart, that you can trust them. And I've been writing with them for quite a few years now, and so we've established that, and we know one another, and we support one another. So again, that's been another saving grace for me, just not feeling quite so isolated, is being able to interact with that group regularly.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. That's one of the things that I have found most helpful. I have a critique, or I'm in a critique group through the Horror Writers Association, which I think you're a part of. You're
Yes,
part
because
of yeah.
Because of you and Benji and Daryl, you said you should really consider joining HWA, and I'm glad that I did.
Yeah, because you're a spooky guy like we are. So
I am a spooky guy.
Yeah, I love that. I love spooky people. So and all the cool spooky people are there. And I think that's important to find a writers group, like you said, that has your best interest at heart, and sometimes even writes in the same genre and kind of understands what you're doing. Because I've been in groups where in college where I was writing my spooky stuff, and they're like, we don't get this. It's like, okay, I can't work with you because I've got to be spooky. So yeah, all of that is really important. And I think Atlanta is really a really great place to be able to do all of that. I think we're really lucky.
We are. Yeah, I mean, what a rich literary community that we have.
For real.
Yeah, there's always a book being released, and which is really awesome. I love to go to book launches. I went to one this past week, Peter McDade, who wrote Songs by Honeybird, and it was just the most amazing book launch. And then we've got Kimberly Brock's book launch this next Tuesday at Foxtail, the Lost Book of Eleanor Dare, which I'm really excited about.
So excited about that book.
Yeah.
She is so cool. She's coming up, I think, as on a right now, or already has been. One of the two. I'm getting.
Yeah. Just a few weeks ago, she was on.
I think so. Yeah, I think I missed it because I had a migraine, which made me sad, because she's very cool. She's such a sweet lady.
Well, another piece of advice too, I think, is that when you're trying to decide what steps you should take to promote your work, I think look to see what similarly situated people are doing.
Right.
Where I would look maybe at other Southern writers, where do they go? Which bookshops are they working with? Take a look at what their tour schedules are like. And I find that most people are open and willing to provide it and to give advice. to you as well. So, ask folks, just, I'm struggling in this particular area. Do you have any suggestions? Uh, or maybe there's someone that that someone has access to that you'd like to be able to be introduced to as well. I think it's just all about us opening doors for one another, and and being able to help pull the community together. Definitely.
Oh, definitely. So one of the things I heard you say is getting to know authors, and I agree with that. So how did you position yourself to get to, I mean, I know that you did like writers groups, so Mickey, and but are there other things that you did to position yourself to get to meet those authors that you wanted to meet?
Sure. Well, I'm such a fanboy with so many writers. There's so many writers I'm in awe of, and I find that so Robert Gwaltney, who wrote A Reliable Wife, he's a New York Times bestselling author, and he blurbed the Cicada Tree.
Oh, wow.
And I loved his writing, and I followed him on social media, and he's from Virginia, and so there are a lot of Gwaltneys in Virginia, and he recognized my last name. He thought, oh, I know some Gwaltneys. I know that name. And and we would communicate back and forth on social media a bit. And so when I was working with the agent on getting advanced blurbs, which terrified me. And I had no idea really even how that worked. I just sort of thought that other folks would collect those for you, but no, you have to do it all on your own. And so Mark was asking me who I might reach out to for potential blurbs. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh. And so I said, well, I sort of kind of, communicate on occasion with Robert Gwaltney. But he sort of dropped off social media, and I don't have his, I don't know how to get a hold of him. And like within 2 minutes, Mark emailed me his email address. So I think that, if you love an author and you admire and respect their work, let them know. I mean, we all love to hear when people like what we do.
Right.
And I mean, I'm certainly so appreciative of it. So I think that it's, how do you make friends, in the world? You go to where like-minded people are. You go to book launches. You participate in organizations and groups like Broadleaf, and and sometimes you write fan letters.
Definitely. I know of at least one story that I'll tell you later on where somebody wrote a fan letter and they ended up marrying the writer. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a really cool story. And now they've been together like almost 20 years. It's crazy. So that's really cool. So it's 7:45. So we've got a couple of questions in the Q&A box. If you guys have more questions, please put them in the Q&A box. And we'll read them because we've got a few minutes to do that. So, okay. So John Sokol says, congrats on your novel. I thought it was amazing. But my question is, why is Cairo, Georgia pronounced like the corn syrup and not the capital of Egypt?
That is a great mystery, John. And I know John. So John and I are social media friends, and I know he's part of the writing community. And he was very kind to reach out to me and share with me that he enjoyed the book. And he even wrote a wonderful review for me. So thank you, John. I'm very appreciative of that. I have no idea why we don't pronounce Cairo, but people in Southwest Georgia are extremely sensitive should you pronounce it incorrectly.
Oh, it's the truth. It's the truth. They're sensitive about a lot of the pronunciations. Yeah. This is a great question though. And John is great. He's been very supportive of me as well. And it's greatly appreciated, John. Thank you so much. Okay, Jess Wilson asked, did you find Annalise's voice in your first draft visions of your book? How did she come to be? Which is a great question.
So Annalise came to be. So I had started writing a book prior to the Cicada Tree that was going to take place in the 1970s. And the protagonist was a little boy. His name was Banks Darlington, and he was 11 years old. And his mother was Annalise Newell Darlington. And I was so fast. She, several chapters in, started to rise to the surface and up from the pages, a very interesting character. And she was making these really interesting parenting choices. And I was like just looking, at the page thinking, well, what made you like this? Like, what must you have been like as a little girl to be like this as an adult? And that's how the Cicada Tree came to be. And that's how 11-year-old Annalise Newell came to be in the Cicada Tree.
I love Annalise. I just want you to know that with all my heart, I love that child. And I want to know what she's like as an adult now. I'm like, wow, she must have developed into something amazing, because she's something. I Jess said in the chat, I would love to read her as a parent. Yeah, me too, Jess. I want to know what she's like as a parent. I also want to know if she's still drinking whiskey. I kind of appreciate her taste in whiskey.
Yeah, I think she probably is. She just doesn't do it in public. She probably still kind of keeps it hidden away. I mean, she's not excessive with it. It's just merely for medicinal purposes.
Oh yeah, totally. And that would be really in line with her generation too, because women don't drink.
Right. And certainly not where people can see you.
Well, no, that'd be embarrassing and inappropriate. Oh my Lord. Of course, I look at Annalise and I really don't think she's the type that really worries about being inappropriate. Ultimately, she's I like her because of that. I appreciate that character because of that, because she's really straightforward, which is really unusual for a Southern woman of that generation.
Yeah, she, at the beginning of the novel, she is fairly happy for the most part, except that her mom and dad have a relationship that's challenged, and she doesn't understand why. I mean, but other than that, and she's not someone who's living in abject poverty, but they're not by any stretch of the imagination affluent. They struggle,
Right.
and in her mind, she has just as much as anyone else until she has that experience where she meets the wealthy Mayfield family. And when she has experiences outside of her own frame of reference, and that breeds obsession, and really and that's the inciting incident really for this book, is when she meets Cordelia Mayfield and her daughter Marlissa.
Mm-hmm. And it kind of shakes her entire world.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely fascinated with the Mayfields, mostly because they remind me of families that I've encountered. I lived in Eufaula, Alabama for about 3 years. There are families like the Mayfields. And they really do shine, by the way. And you probably encountered that too. It's a different kind of, it's like I've encountered the kind of Southernness that Annalise has. We weren't that poor. And I've encountered middle class 1970s Southernness, but that's a whole different type of Southernness, I think.
Yeah, when you get into old Southern family tradition, in those old wealthy families, I think everyone's fascinated by them, but they're never quite what they said. They're never quite who you think they're going to be.
Right. There's this fine veneer. I've learned that there's fine veneer, and underneath that veneer, there's all kinds of things going on. Right.
Exactly. So I see that Jessica says, so as an adult, did Annalise marry Abel? Well, in that first version, that they are together and they have a son, an 11-year-old boy.
Yeah, I've been kind of like, when you mentioned that Saturday at Foxtails, I'm like, and you mentioned the last name in that first draft, I'm like, it's Abel. I was like sitting there trying not to say anything, and I was like, yes. Because I was totally excited about that. And I can see Jess's too. Yeah. I totally am all for that, because he's like one of the best guys in the entire book. He's like,
men in the Cicada Tree really sort of dwell in the shadows, only stepping out from them to stir trouble on occasion. And Abel, he's this little boy that carries a pocket that he collects words in a notebook he keeps in his back pocket, and people give him as gifts and he gives words as gifts. And I think that he's sort of representative. He's the hope for what man can be, if we're lucky.
Right. And I think that's just, I just love that you've encapsulated that into one little boy, because that's something that's so rare. He's a rare boy. He's a rare boy. And I really love that. Um, I also love Annalise's mom.
Right.
Grace is, I like that she's complicated, and I sympathize with her. As a single mom, I can totally sympathize with how she's having to try to hold everything together. And also support those gifts that are hers.
You
And I
know,
love those.
I'm glad that you love her. It's funny too, because when the novel that led to the Cicada Tree, Grace is a grandmother in those opening chapters. And so Grace and her mom are still connected and still close. But Annalise's circumstances have changed tremendously from the time that she was a little girl until she's an adult.
Of course, of course. So in that version, did Grace still read the stitches? I just love that she reads the stitches.
So in that first version, there wasn't quite the level of magical realism that there is in the Cicada Tree. And I think that in that version, I really didn't even, there's a scene that I wrote. I really was still struggling with who I was as a writer and what my voice was. And it was
Right.
when I was writing that novel, there's a scene I wrote with an adult Annalise where I thought, oh, this is who I am as a writer. That's my voice. And I remember the exact moment when I realized that. And then when I shared that with a critique group, they were like, yeah, I think this is who you are.
That's lovely.
When I read that
Wow.
one scene. And yeah, and so I'll never forget that chapter. I mean, it's nothing exceptional, but it has tones and hints of what I've been working toward all those years.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I can't really pinpoint my magical moment like that, but I know that it was there. And it's so powerful, because now then you can kind of feel more confident about things, and
Yeah.
you can keep exploring then, which is awesome. We are almost out of time. Does I keep hoping some other folks will ask questions, because I'm
That
just
went by quickly.
yeah. Yeah, it did. Well, we're having a good time. That's what
Yeah.
it is. We're just visiting, having a good time. So you referenced a new novel and talked a little bit about that, and I'm kind of excited about. He talked about this one at Foxtails too, folks, and I'm excited about it already. I want to read it now. Because there are ghosts involved. And so, can you explain just a little bit more about that book? And we're going to wrap this up.
Sure. So the next project will be Southern Gothic. It's going to take place in 1931, and the protagonist is a female ghost named Willadine, and she bears the distinction of being the only ghost to have ever escaped Eulalie Sky's hang trap tree. And Willadine has no memory of the life before. She's an existential crisis, and she, along with just a handful of other living people, are there on an island called Good Hope, which is a Georgia coastal barrier island, a fictitious one that I'm sort of using Cumberland as the foundation for building that world. So I'm excited about it. I've been writing notes madly. I've been discovering, just figuring out what am I going to call folks. I do know the inciting incident. I do have some of the big picture moments in my mind. Now I'll just have to see if I can execute it.
Very cool. And I think you will be able to. I have no doubt. And I hope you get to go to Cumberland and do a little bit of research too. It is lovely down there.
I've never been to Cumberland Island, but definitely over these next few months, I would like to make a trip there to do a little bit of research.
Awesome. Well, it is 7:56, and I know some people are wanting to go watch some game that's happening at Truist Park that might involve the Braves. So we don't want to interfere. Yeah, we don't want to interfere with greatness such as that. So yeah. Yes, we know about it. We have fans. Thank you so much, Robert, for coming out and hanging out with us for a little bit and sharing your experiences and talking a little bit about the book. I'm so excited for you, and it's such a beautiful book. And I wish you the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we will be doing another right now, I think next week, or the week after. Zach mentioned this at the first.
Yeah.
So y'all come back out and see us. And I think Zach's hosting the next one. Thursday, the 21st. Thank you, Zach. Chris Joyner, and I could not remember his name either. And remember, Chris is from the AJC. He is going to be talking about nonfiction, and I'm already excited about his book because it looks like true crime, and I am all in for that. And so we'll see you guys next time, and thanks so much.
Good night.
Bye, y'all.